My sister thought her 9-year-old son smashing my son's birthday cake was funny, claiming I needed to loosen up. When she banned me from the house I paid for, thinking she held the power, she didn't realize the deed transfer was scheduled for the next morning. I made one call, canceled the gift, and turned her landlord into her worst nightmare. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The frosting was blue, a deep, oceanic blue that my son, Ethan, had picked out himself. It was a 3-tier vanilla sponge cake, decorated with fondant sharks and little edible anchors, sitting proudly on the center of the picnic table in the park pavilion. Ethan was turning 7, and for the last 3 months, this cake was all he had talked about. He didn't care about the presents or the bouncy castle as much as he cared about blowing out the candles on his shark attack cake. I stood by the cooler, organizing juice boxes, watching Ethan laugh with his friends. The sun was high, the air was crisp, and for a moment everything felt perfect. I had worked overtime for 6 weeks as a senior financial analyst to pay for this party, and more importantly, to finalize the massive financial gift I was about to bestow upon my family the next day. I felt a swell of pride. I was the provider, the fixer, the one who made things happen. Then I heard the screech. "I want the shark now." It was Kyle, my 9-year-old nephew. He was standing by the table, his face flushed red, pointing an accusing finger at the cake. My sister, Tara, was sitting on a bench nearby, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. "Just give him a piece, Isabella," she called out lazily, not even checking to see if we had sung "Happy Birthday" yet. "We haven't done the candles, Kyle," I said gently, walking over. "You have to wait until we sing to Ethan, then you can have the piece with the big shark." Kyle didn't like that answer. He had never been told no in his life, at least not in a way that stuck. He looked at me, then at Ethan, who was running over, his eyes wide with worry. "It's my cake," Ethan whispered, trying to be brave but clearly intimidated by his older, larger cousin. "Not anymore," Kyle screamed. Time seemed to slow down. I lunged forward, but I was too far away. Kyle raised both hands, fingers splayed like claws, and brought them down with all his body weight onto the center of the cake. "Isblat." The sound was sickeningly wet. Blue frosting exploded outward, splattering onto the wooden table and Ethan's new t-shirt. The fondant sharks were crushed into unrecognizable sugary rubble. The structure collapsed, the layers sliding apart into a heap of ruined sponge and cream. Ethan let out a wail that broke my heart instantly. He dropped to his knees, staring at the destroyed masterpiece. But it was what Kyle did next that froze my blood. He didn't look sorry. He didn't look scared. He pulled his hands out of the mess, coated in blue slime, licked his fingers, and screamed at the top of his lungs, "Now no one gets any." The silence that followed was deafening. Every parent in the pavilion stopped. The other kids froze. I looked at Tara. Surely this was the moment. Surely she would rush over, grab her son, apologize profusely, and try to salvage the day. Tara slowly stood up, tucked her phone into her back pocket, and sighed. She walked over, looked at the decimated cake, and then looked at me. "Well," she said, a smirk playing on her lips. "I told you he was hungry, Isabella. You shouldn't have made him wait. Kids get hangry." I stared at her, my hands trembling. "He destroyed Ethan's cake, Tara. He did it on purpose." "He's a child," she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively as if I were discussing a spilled glass of water. "Don't make a scene. It's just a cake. I'll buy you a box mix later." I looked at Ethan, who was sobbing into his hands. I looked at the ruin of the party I had spent months planning. And then I looked at my sister, standing there with that arrogant entitlement that had defined our entire relationship. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, it was in her complete lack of empathy. It was worse than the destruction itself. It was the confirmation that she didn't care about my son's joy, only her son's whims. "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking not with sadness, but with a rage so cold it frightened me. "Excuse me," Tara laughed, looking around at her husband, Derek, who had finally lumbered over from the grill, a beer in his hand. "Get out of my son's party," I said, louder this time. "You're kicking us out," Derek asked, chuckling. "Over a cake, you're crazy, Izzy." "Go," I commanded. Tara grabbed Kyle's shoulder, not to scold him, but to usher him away like a victim. She leaned in close too. My face, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You're a selfish witch, Isabella. You always have been. You care more about sugar and flour than your own family." As they walked away, Kyle turned back and stuck his tongue out at Ethan. I stood there, holding my crying son, watching them leave. My chest felt tight, like a band of iron was crushing my ribs. But amidst the anger and the sorrow, a strange clarity began to form in my mind. They had walked away with such confidence, such arrogance. They thought this was just another spat. They thought I would get over it, just like I always did. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Tomorrow was Monday. And on Monday morning at 9:00 a.m., my lawyer was scheduled to file the deed transfer that would legally give them the house they were currently sleeping in. They thought they were punishing me. They had no idea they had just signed their own eviction notice. The drive home from the park was quiet. Ethan had eventually calmed down after I promised we would stop at the expensive bakery on the way home and buy the biggest chocolate cake they had, even if it didn't have sharks on it. He was sitting in the back seat, clutching a new Lego set, his eyes red and puffy. "Mom," he asked softly. "Yeah, buddy," I replied, my eyes fixed on the road, though my mind was miles away. "Why does Kyle hate me?" The question was like a physical blow. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "He doesn't hate you, Ethan. He hasn't been taught how to be kind. That's not your fault. That's never your fault." "Aunt Tara said it was my fault," he whispered. "She said I was hogging the spotlight." I nearly slammed on the brakes. The audacity. The sheer, unadulterated malice required to tell a 7-year-old boy that his own birthday party was an act of selfishness. I forced myself to breathe, counting down from 10. I needed to be calm for Ethan. I needed to salvage what was left of his day. "Aunt Tara was wrong," I said firmly, "and she's going to have a lot of time to think about how wrong she was." We got the chocolate cake. We went home to my house, the modest 2-bedroom condo I lived in with Ethan. It was cozy and ours, but it was nothing compared to the property I allowed Tara and Derek to live in. That house, the family house, was a sprawling 4-bedroom colonial in a coveted school district. I had bought it 5 years ago as an investment property after a massive bonus from a corporate merger I'd overseen. When Tara got pregnant with Kyle and Derek lost his job, for the 3rd time, I had let them move in temporarily. Temporarily became 5 years. They paid no rent. They paid no property tax. I covered the major repairs. They paid for utilities, and even then Mary, my mother, often slipped them money to cover the electric bill. I had spent the last 6 months working with my estate attorney to transfer the title to them. I wanted to be done with it. I wanted to stop being their landlord and just be their sister. I thought if I gave them the house, a literal $500,000 asset, they would finally feel secure. They would finally stop resenting me for my success. I thought it would buy peace. I put Ethan to bed at 8:30 p.m. He was exhausted, sugar-crashed, and emotionally drained. I sat on the edge of his bed, stroking his hair until his breathing evened out. I walked into the living room and poured myself a glass of wine. My phone had been buzzing incessantly for hours, but I had ignored it. Now, in the silence of my condo, I picked it up. There were 14 missed calls from my mother, Mary. There were 3 from Derek, and there was a string of texts from Tara. I opened the message thread. "Tara, 4:15 p.m., you seriously embarrassed us in front of everyone. Kyle is crying because you yelled at him." Tara, 5:30 p.m., I expect an apology, Isabella. You prioritized a cake over your nephew's feelings. It's sick. Tara, 7:00 p.m., Mom agrees with me. You're acting like a diva. You think because you have money you can treat people like trash. And then, the final message. The one that came in just 20 minutes ago. Tara, 8:45 p.m. You know what? You're clearly too toxic to be around my son. You're overreacting, and I'm done walking on eggshells. Don't bother coming around anymore. This is MY House, and you aren't welcome here until you learn to respect us. I stared at the words, "This is MY House." She actually believed it. Because I had let them live there for so long, because I had promised to sign the papers, she had already mentally claimed ownership. In her mind, the transaction was a formality. In her mind, the house was hers, and I was just the annoyance she had to tolerate to keep the lights on. I took a sip of wine, the liquid cool and sharp against my tongue. A strange sense of calm washed over me. It was the same feeling I got right before I dismantled a fraudulent company's ledger during an audit. It was the feeling of knowing exactly where the bodies were buried and having the shovel in my hand. She had banned me from the property. She had declared ownership. She had insulted my son and me. But she had forgotten the timeline. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Sunday. The papers were sitting on my lawyer's desk. Signed by me, yes, but not yet notarized by the second witness, and definitely not filed with the county clerk. That was scheduled for Monday morning at 9:00 a.m. Technically, legally, and in every way that mattered, that house was still 100% mine. I typed a reply. I didn't scream. I didn't use caps lock. I didn't defend myself. I simply wrote, "Me cool, I'll unlist the house title tomorrow." I hit send. I watched the delivered status appear, then read. I set the phone down on the coffee table and waited. I knew exactly what was going to happen. They were going to panic, but they didn't know the half of it. I wasn't just going to stop the transfer. I was going to do what I should have done 5 years ago. I was going to treat this like a business transaction. And business was about to get very, very ugly for them. The phone rang 30 seconds later. It was Tara. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Derek, voicemail. Then my mother, Mary. I hesitated. My mother was the architect of this dynamic. She was the one who had always insisted that I, the capable one, needed to make allowances for Tara, the sensitive one. When we were kids, if Tara broke my toys, Mom would say, "She didn't mean it, Isabella. You have so many, just share." When I got straight A's and Tara skipped class, Mom would say, "Don't brag, Isabella. It makes your sister feel stupid." I had spent my entire life shrinking so Tara could feel big. The house was supposed to be the ultimate act of shrinking, giving away my biggest asset so she could finally feel like an equal. I picked up the phone. "Hello, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "Isabella," Mary's voice was shrill, breathless. "What on earth is going on?" Tara called me sobbing. She said, "You're threatening to take their home away." "I'm not taking anything away, Mom," I said, walking over to my laptop and opening it up. "I'm simply deciding not to give a gift. There's a difference." "A gift, that house is their home. You promised, Isabella, you promised them." "I promised a lot of things," I countered. "I promised to look out for them. I promised to help them get on their feet. But today, Tara looked me in the eye after her son destroyed Ethan's birthday and told me I wasn't welcome. She said it was her house." "She was just upset," Mary pleaded. "You know how she gets. She's under so much stress with Kyle. He's a spirited boy." "He's a bully, Mom, and she's raising him to be an entitled brat just like—" I stopped myself. "Just like she is." "How dare you?" Mary gasped. "Your sister struggles. She doesn't have your fancy job or your brain for numbers. She needs security. If you don't sign those papers tomorrow, you are putting your own nephew on the street. Do you hear me? You are making them homeless." "No," I said, my fingers flying across my keyboard, logging into my cloud storage where the digital copies of the deed drafts were stored. "They are making themselves homeless. Tara told me not to come around. She set the boundary. I'm just respecting it. I can't come around to a house I don't own, so I'll keep owning it. And if I own it and I'm not welcome, then they can't stay." "You are being vindictive," Mary spat. "This is about a cake, a stupid cake." It's about respect, Mom. It's about 5 years of paying their bills while they treat me like an ATM. It's about Derek refusing to work because he's waiting for the right opportunity while I work 60-hour weeks. And today was the breaking point. I could hear Mary taking a ragged breath. If you do this, Isabella, if you pull this rug out from under them, I will never forgive you. You will tear this family apart. The family is already torn, Mom, I said softly. You just never noticed because I was the one holding the pieces together. I'm done glued. I hung up. I looked at the photo on my desk. It was taken 3 years ago at Christmas. Tara was wearing a designer coat I knew she couldn't afford. Derek was holding a new gaming console. Kyle was buried in toys. I was in the back, wearing jeans and a sweater, smiling tiredly. I had paid for that entire Christmas. I had paid for the dinner. I had paid for the gifts. Tara and Derek were masters of appearance. To the outside world, they were the struggling young family just trying to make it in a harsh economy. Derek called himself an entrepreneur, though his ventures usually involved buying bulk items from Alibaba and failing to sell them, or dabbling in crypto with money he borrowed from me. Tara called herself an interior designer, but mostly she just rearranged furniture in the house I owned and posted photos of it on Instagram with captions like "Home Sweet Home, My Sanctuary." They were vampires. They drained energy, money, and joy. And the worst part was they truly believed they deserved it. They believed my success was a cosmic error that needed to be redistributed to them. I opened my email and composed a message to my attorney, Mr. Henderson. Subject, urgent stop transfer, 12 Oak Street. Mr. Henderson, please do not file the deed transfer for 12 Oak Street tomorrow morning. I am revoking the gift immediately. Please prepare a notice to quit for the occupants. We are moving to eviction. Regards, Isabella. I stared at the screen. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was the nuclear option. Once I sent this, there was no going back. The war would be total. I thought about Ethan's face when the cake collapsed. I thought about Kyle's laugh. I thought about Tara's text, "Don't bother coming around anymore." I clicked send. Monday morning arrived with the grim predictability of a storm front. I dropped Ethan off at school, giving him an extra tight hug. He seemed to have bounced back, resilient as ever, but I carried the weight of the impending conflict in my gut. I arrived at my office, a glass-walled sanctuary of order and logic in the downtown financial district, at 8:30 a.m. By 9:05 a.m., my desk phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson. Isabella, his gravelly voice was calm. I received your email. I have stopped the filing. The deed remains in your name. Thank you, Arthur, I said, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. What's the next step? Well, he paused. Since there is no formal lease agreement, because this was a family arrangement, they are considered tenants at will. In our state, you need to give them a 30-day notice to vacate. If they refuse to leave after that, we file for eviction. It can be messy. Draft the notice, I said. I want it served today. Hire a process server. I don't want to do it personally. Understood, but Isabella, are you sure this is your sister? I'm sure. Also, Arthur, I need to look into something else. I've been paying the property taxes and insurance, but they were responsible for utilities and upkeep. Can we pull the utility records? The water and electric bills are in my name, but they were supposed to be paying them directly to the provider. I can check. Why? Because, I said, looking at a spreadsheet on my screen where I tracked my personal finances. I have a suspicion. I noticed my credit score dipped slightly last month. I didn't look into it because I was busy with the merger, but if they've been defaulting on bills in my name, I'll run a full check, Arthur promised. I spent the morning working or trying to. My phone was on silent, but it vibrated across my desk every few minutes. Text after text. Derek, Isabella, let's talk. You're making a mistake. Tara, you can't do this. We told Kyle the house was ours. Mom, pick up the phone. At noon, I decided to leverage my professional skills. I am a financial analyst. I find money that people try to hide, and I find debts that people try to ignore. I logged into the utility accounts associated with the Oak Street property. I had given Tara the login credentials 5 years ago so she could manage the payments. My jaw dropped. The electric bill was overdue by 4 months. There was a disconnect notice scheduled for next week. The water bill was similar, but that wasn't the worst part. I dug deeper into my credit report. I found a credit card opened 2 years ago. The Home Depot consumer card, authorized user, Derek. The balance was $12,000, maxed out. I hadn't opened that card. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled up the transaction history. Lumber, high-end fixtures, expensive tools, a $3,000 outdoor grill. Wait, the grill? The one Derek was using at the party yesterday. He had bragged about getting a steal on it. He had bought it with a credit card he opened in my name. This wasn't just mooching anymore. This was identity theft. This was fraud. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. I had been feeling guilty about the eviction. I had been wondering if I was being too harsh. But this changed the landscape entirely. They weren't just ungrateful tenants, they were criminals living in my house, stealing my credit, and smashing my son's happiness. I printed everything. The utility notices, the credit card statements, the transaction logs. I organized them into a neat blue folder. At 2:00 p.m., Arthur called back. Isabella, the process server is on his way to Oak Street, but I have some news. Tara called the office. Did she? She was agitated. She claimed that you had a verbal contract to give them the house and that she has texts proving it. She threatened to sue for promissory estoppel. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Let her try. Arthur, I'm sending you a file. I found a credit card opened in my name by Derek, and the Illities are months behind. They've committed financial fraud. Oh, Arthur said, his tone shifting from advisor to shark. That changes things. That gives us cause for immediate eviction due to criminal activity on the premises and financial abuse. We can shorten the timeline, and we can leverage this to keep them quiet. Do it, I said, but Arthur, I want to tell them myself. Not about the eviction, the server can do that. I want to tell them I know about the money. Isabella, I advise against a confrontation. I'm not going to confront them, I said, standing up and grabbing my coat. I'm going to inspect my property. As the landlord, I have the right to inspect for damages, don't I? Especially if I suspect illegal activity. Technically, yes, with 24 hours notice. But given the emergency nature of the utility shutoff notices, I'm going over there, I said. I need to see what else they've destroyed. I didn't give them 24 hours. I reasoned that the impending utility shutoff constituted an emergency that required immediate landlord intervention. It was a thin legal veil, but I didn't care. I needed to see their faces when the reality hit. I pulled into the driveway of 12 Oak Street at 4:30 p.m. Derek's truck was there. Tara's SUV was there. I walked up the path. The grass was overgrown. There were toys scattered everywhere, expensive, battery-operated cars and drones rotting in the sun. The front porch, which I had paid to have repainted last year, was scuffed and dirty. I unlocked the front door with my key. The lock stuck for a moment. They had probably changed it without telling me, but I had a master key system installed years ago for emergencies. It turned. I pushed the door open. Who is it? Tara's voice came from the kitchen. She sounded frantic. I walked in. The house smelled of stale popcorn and dog. They didn't have a dog when they moved in. It's the landlord, I announced, my voice echoing in the hallway. Tara rushed out of the kitchen, phone in hand. When she saw me, her face twisted into a mask of fury. You have no right to walk in here. I told you not to come around. And I told you I was unlisting the title, I said calmly, stepping further into the living room. It was a mess. There were holes in the drywall. The carpet was stained. This is my property, Tara, and since you're trying to ban me from it, I'm here to inspect my asset. Derek appeared behind her, looking sweaty and nervous. Isabella, look, we can talk about this. You can't just... Shut up, Derek, I said, not even looking at him. I tossed the blue folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. We're past talking. We're at the evidence stage. Tara looked at the folder, then at me. What is that? That, I pointed, is the credit card statement for the Home Depot card Derek opened in my name. $12,000, Derek? Really? Derek's face went pale. I was going to pay it back. It was for the house, improvements. Improvements? I gestured to the hole in the wall. Is that an improvement? And the grill, the one you cooked burgers on yesterday while your son terrorized mine, is that a structural improvement? Tara grabbed the folder and ripped it open. Her eyes scanned the pages. She didn't look ashamed, she looked cornered. You can't prove Derek did this, she snarled. Maybe you opened it and forgot. You're always so busy. IP addresses, Tara, I said coldly. The application was submitted from the IP address of this house, on a computer with the device name Derek PC. I've already pulled the logs. So what? Tara threw the folder back down. You're rich. Who cares about 12 grand? You were going to give us a house worth 500,000. This is pennies to you. It's fraud, I stated. And it's a felony, and it's the reason you're leaving. We're not leaving, Tara screamed, stepping into my personal space. We have rights, squatters' rights, tenants' rights. You can't just throw a family on the street because of a credit card. Just then, a heavy knock echoed from the front door. We all froze. That will be the process server, I said, checking my watch. Right on time. Derek looked at the door, then at me, panic finally setting in. Isabella, please, don't let him serve us. If we have an eviction on our record, we'll never be able to rent anywhere else. Please. You should have thought about that before you let your son destroy my son's birthday, I said, my voice devoid of pity. And you definitely should have thought about it before you stole from me. I turned and walked to the door, opening it. A large man with a clipboard stood there. Tara and Derek Miller, he asked. They're right inside, I said, stepping aside. As the server walked past me to hand the papers to a sobbing Derek and a screaming Tara, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was my mother again. I declined the call. The trap was sprung, but looking at Ra's face, the pure, unadulterated rage, I knew this wasn't over. She wasn't going to go quietly. She was going to try to burn the house down with me inside it, metaphorically speaking. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal motions and social warfare. Tara didn't pack. Instead, she went on the offensive. She took to Facebook. She wrote long, rambling posts about how her rich, heartless sister was evicting her innocent family over a misunderstanding at a birthday party. She left out the part about the fraud. She left out the part about the 5 years of free rent. She painted herself as the victim of a cruel, child-hating tyrant. People I barely knew, distant cousins, old high school friends, started commenting. Stay strong, Mama. Karma will get her. How can family be so cruel? It hurt, I won't lie. It stung to see people judging me without knowing the truth. But I had Arthur, and I had my evidence. Then came the escalation. I received a call from Child Protective Services. An anonymous teepster had claimed I was neglecting Ethan, leaving him alone for hours, and that my home was unsanitary. When the social worker arrived at my spotless condo, saw my well-fed, happy son, and reviewed my work schedule, she closed the case within 20 minutes. This happens more than you'd think during family disputes, she told me apologetically. But that was the line. That was the moment the last ember of sisterly love died. Tara had tried to take my son away. She's dangerous, I told Arthur the next day. We need them out now. I don't want to wait the full 30 days. We have the hearing for the emergency eviction on Thursday, Arthur said. Because of the fraud and the damage to the property, the judge expedited it. But Isabella, you need to be prepared. They have a lawyer. A legal aid attorney, but still. They're going to argue that the credit card was a gift, that you authorized it verbally. I have the emails, I said. I went back 5 years. Every time I gave them money, I documented it. Here is $200 for groceries. Here is $500 for car repair. There is no email authorizing a credit card. The pattern of behavior shows specific requested amounts. The credit card is an anomaly. Good, bring everything. The night before the hearing, my mother showed up at my door. She looked 10 years older. Isabella, she said, standing in the rain, please drop the case, Tara, she's falling apart. Kyle is acting out at school. Derek is drinking again, you have to stop this. I didn't start this, Mom, I said, not inviting her in. They stole from me. They tried to ruin my reputation. Tara called CPS on me, Mom. Did you know that? Mary flinched. She was just desperate. She didn't mean it. She tried to have Ethan taken away, I said, my voice shaking. If she had succeeded, Ethan would be in foster care right now. Do you understand that? Your sensitive daughter tried to orphan your grandson. Mary began to cry. She's sick, Isabella. She's not right in the head. She needs help, not homelessness. Then you help her, I said. You take her in, but she is leaving my house. And if you defend her one more time, you're not welcome in my life either. I closed the door. I slid down against the wood and sat on the floor, burying my face in my knees. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But I knew that if I opened that door, I would be enabling the abuse for another decade. Thursday came. The courtroom was small and smelled of floor wax. Tara and Derek sat at the other table. Derek wouldn't look at me. Tara glared, her eyes puffy, wearing a modest dress I had bought her for a job interview she never went to. The judge was a stern woman, with glasses perched on the end of her nose. Their lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my clients have lived in this home for 5 years. There was a verbal agreement that the home was theirs. The eviction is a retaliatory measure because of a family dispute. The alleged fraud is a misunderstanding regarding authorized spending for home repairs. Arthur stood up. He didn't make a speech. He simply handed the judge the blue folder and a new binder I had prepared. Your Honor, Arthur said, the plaintiff submits evidence of unauthorized credit lines opened in her name. We also submit the text messages from the defendant, Tara Miller, dated the night of the incident, explicitly stating, don't bother coming around anymore, acknowledging the plaintiff's exclusion from the property. Furthermore, we have an affidavit from the utility company regarding 5 months of non-payment despite funds being provided for that purpose. The judge flipped through the pages. She paused at the credit card statement. She paused at the text messages. She looked up at Tara. Mrs. Miller, did you send this text? Tara stood up, her voice trembling. Yes, but I was angry. She made my son cry. And this credit card, the judge continued, can you show me the written authorization from the plaintiff, allowing you to open a line of credit in her name? She told us to, Tara shouted, losing her composure. She said, fix up the house. How were we supposed to do that without money? She has so much of it, she doesn't even miss it. The courtroom went silent. Tara had just admitted it. She admitted spending the money because I had so much of it. The judge closed the folder. Judgment for the plaintiff. The defendants have 72 hours to vacate the premises. A writ of possession will be issued. I am also forwarding the evidence of financial fraud to the district attorney's office for review. Tara screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated fury. You witch, you ruined everything. I hope you die alone. The bailiff moved forward. Derek put his head in his hands. I stood up, gathered my papers, and walked out. I didn't look back. The eviction was scheduled for Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the deed transfer was supposed to happen. The irony was not lost on me. I hired a security detail. I didn't trust them to leave peacefully. I also hired a moving crew, not to help them, but to remove their belongings and place them on the curb if they hadn't packed. I arrived at the house at 9:00 a.m. A sheriff's deputy was there to enforce the writ. The scene was chaotic. They hadn't packed a single box. They were in the living room, sitting on the sofa, refusing to move. Kyle was playing a video game, the volume turned up to maximum. "We're not leaving," Tara screamed when the deputy entered. "This is my house. My sister is a liar." "Ma'am," the deputy said firmly, "you have a court order. You need to leave now, or you will be arrested for trespassing." "Arrest me then," Tara shrieked. I stood in the doorway, flanked by the security guards. "Tara," I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "don't do this in front of Kyle." "You don't talk about him." She lunged at me, but a security guard stepped in between us. "Derek," I said, looking at my brother-in-law, "the DA is reviewing the credit card file. If you leave now, quietly, I might be persuaded to ask them to show leniency. But if you make the sheriff drag you out, I will press for the maximum sentence." It was a bluff. I had no control over the DA, but Derek didn't know that. He looked at the deputy, then at the handcuffs on the deputy's belt. He stood up and turned off the TV. "Derek, what are you doing?" Tara yelled. "It's over, Tara," Derek mumbled. "I'm not going to jail." "You coward," she screamed, slapping his arm. But the spell was broken. Derek started grabbing armfuls of clothes and throwing them into trash bags. The movers I had hired stepped in and started efficiently stripping the room. Tara stood in the center of the chaos, watching her kingdom dismantle. She looked at me, her eyes filled with hate. "Where are we supposed to go? We have nowhere." "You have Mom's," I said. "She said she'd take you in." "Mom lives in a one-bedroom apartment." "Then I guess you'll be cozy," I said. "Kyle, grab your shoes." Kyle looked at me. For the first time, he didn't look like a bully. He looked like a scared little boy. "Aunt Izzy." "It's okay, Kyle," I said, my voice softening. "You're going to Grandma's." "But my game." "Take the game," I said. It took 3 hours. By noon, the house was empty. Their possessions were piled in the driveway. Derek loaded what he could into his truck. Tara sat in her car, refusing to look at me. As they backed out of the driveway, Mary pulled up. She got out, looking at the pile of junk on the lawn, then at me. "Are you happy?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "No, Mom," I said honestly. "I'm not happy. This is a tragedy. But it's a tragedy they wrote. I just refuse to play the supporting role anymore." Mary shook her head, got back in her car, and followed Tara and Derek. I walked back into the empty house. It was filthy. The walls were damaged, the carpets were ruined, but it was quiet. It was mine again. I walked to the kitchen, to the spot where I had imagined signing the deed over to them. I took a deep breath. The air was stale, but it felt lighter. The parasite was gone. The fallout was swift and absolute. Tara and Derek moved in with my mother. It lasted 3 weeks before they were kicked out. Apparently, Tara tried to take over Mom's finances, and Mary finally saw the light. They are currently living in a rental in a different town, paid for by Derek, who was forced to get a job at a warehouse to pay off the restitution for the credit card fraud. He avoided jail time by pleading guilty and agreeing to a payment plan, something I pushed for Kyle's sake. I sold the Oak Street house. I couldn't keep it. Too many bad memories. I sold it to a nice young couple who promised to fix the garden. With the proceeds from the sale, after paying off the mortgage and the credit card debt Derek racked up, I had a substantial sum left over. I didn't keep it. I didn't want that money. I set up an irrevocable trust for Ethan. It will pay for his college, his first car, and maybe a down payment on his own home one day. But there's a clause. He only gets it if he maintains a job and attends financial literacy courses. I will not raise another Tara. I also set up a smaller, separate trust for Kyle. He can access it when he's 25, provided he has a clean criminal record. It was my last act of aunthood. I haven't seen him since the eviction, but I hope, one day, he breaks the cycle. My relationship with my mother is recovering. We talk once a week. She respects my boundaries now. She realizes that by enabling Tara, she almost destroyed us all. As for me, I threw another party for Ethan a month later, just us and his friends. We had a chocolate cake. No sharks, No screaming, just laughter. I sat back and watched him eat, messy and happy. I realized that by cutting off the dead weight, I hadn't just saved my finances. I had saved my peace. I had taught my son that family is important, but self-respect is non-negotiable. And somewhere, in a small apartment, I knew Tara was probably still blaming me for everything. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. Her voice was just noise, and I had finally learned how to hit mute.